Hey, welcome back, everybody, to my podcast. This is the 64th episode after being off for over a month. I've been gone, busy, and if you follow me, you know why. This is an episode with Simon Cote, who's a good friend of mine, and we go way back, really way back. And today he talked about his venture as a head coach and the career that didn't work out. So you're going to hear the other side of the coaching world. You're going to hear what it means to get fired, what it means to deal with some identity issues if you had to identify yourself as a coach your whole life and all of a sudden you're not a coach anymore, what to do, and a whole bunch of challenges along the way, and the transition into a new life, into a new career. So Simon was very candid and very open about it. He has no ego. He's one of the kindest and nicest person that I know. One of the nicest people that I know. And it was a pleasure talking to him. And also, this episode is sponsored by ProBalls.com. ProBalls.com is a statistical platform that you know very well if you follow this podcast. And if you're a basketball nerd like me, you are going to find a whole bunch of goodies on ProBalls.com. So go ahead and check it out whenever you can. Meanwhile, please enjoy this episode with my good friend, Simon Cote. Thanks. Bye. Simon, what's up, man? Welcome to my podcast.
How you doing? Glad to be here.
Well, this is my first podcast in a while because I was on a little break with all the things going on in June and beginning of July. I'm sure you followed it. You did. We were in touch. We've known each other now for, I was trying to go back in time. I think it's over 15 years now. And I wouldn't be able to do this podcast about the topics that we're going to talk about if we weren't friends like we are. I think that the topics we're going to dive into require a lot of deep connections and security between the two parties, and also very mature and self-assured perception of things as you have. So I'm glad you're coming on, and I'm glad that you are, let's say, willing to talk about the things that we're going to dive into today.
Yeah, I'm happy to do it. Hey, first, congratulations on being a world champion.
Yeah,
Not many
thank you.
people can say that.
Thank you. You know how it is. I used to be like really, oh, now you can't call yourself world champion. It's an NBA championship. It's not a world championship that only exists with national teams. Now, when you win the NBA championship, it's like, no, I'm a world champion now.
Yeah, you really can say it.
But forget about all that. A world champion, that's what it is.
Yeah, no doubt.
So, before we dive into it, so just to make sure, that people understand, you had a long coaching career, and we're going to talk about the path throughout the coaching career, what inspired you to be a coach, your journey as an assistant coach, your transition to a head coach, and then the things that come also with the downfall of a head coach, the challenges that come with mental challenges. And then we're going to transition into you transitioning into a completely new field and what the challenges are with that, and how people can, especially young coaches and young assistant coaches, maybe can have that side of the coin as well, show to them, presented to them. So let's define, or let's define your career in the beginning of how you started to be an assistant coach. What inspired you to be a coach? And you had early on a career at University of Tennessee and SMU. And I was wondering what inspired you to be a head assistant coach in the beginning, and then inspire you to go overseas to coach, because that's a whole different avenue.
Yeah. I grew up playing all the sports, but basketball is the one I really fell in love with. So in high school, my dream was to play in the NBA. And of course, I thought I was going to make it until I got cut my junior year in high school. That was a crushing blow. But actually, it was a great experience in that I bounced back from it and made the team the following year with a lot of hard work and dedication. So
that's the Jordan mentality. All right, I like it.
Yeah, right.
That's, you're on a Jordan trajectory there.
Yeah, I was almost this close. So just like Jordan, just a little bit
just
less.
right there, right there.
Yeah. So, but Yeah, so I love basketball. I played it. I didn't play too much in high school, but I was on the team and I was a workhorse in practice. But I read a book called Season on the Brink by written about Bobby Knight and the Indiana Hoosiers. And it really inspired me. And I thought I wanted to be a coach like Bobby Knight, basically a authoritarian tyrant that got the most out of people, supposedly. So, I mean, he was an unbelievable, obviously, Hall of Fame coach. But I thought I was going to be a coach like that, and I wanted to be a coach like that until I went to college and I started working with University of Tennessee men's basketball team as a student manager. And we had a coach there, Kevin O'Neill, who was a great coach and was similar in style to Bobby Knight. And I realized at that time that did not fit my personality. It's not the type of coach that I wanted to be or could be. And there's a lot of ways to coach, but that didn't fit me personally. And yeah, so I just knew after reading that book that I wanted to be a part of basketball and be a part of teams and try to build cultures and win championships. And that's what drove me to becoming a coach. So yeah, I worked with a team there at Tennessee, and that got my foot in the door.
And how did you think of going to Europe? I mean, that was also at that time, or not the most common path to go from college and coach in Europe, where most coaches probably seek a head coaching career in college.
Yeah, I mean, my dream was to become a head coach in college basketball. But, I worked at Tennessee for, I think, 3 years, student manager, graduate assistant. And then I got an assistant coaching job at SMU in Dallas. And I was there 4 years. And, it was a combination of I was not satisfied with the life, the team that I had, not the players, but just the culture that was being built. And I think it's very, very hard to build a good culture in such a high pressure environment like college basketball. And so I was frustrated at the job, and I felt like it was going to be really tough for me to get a higher level job in college with the situation I was in, because in order to get a job in college, you need your head coach to be well connected and to be proactive. And I wasn't sure that was going to happen. And I was working really long hours, like so many college basketball coaches do, and mostly in the office, and only 15% basketball, and the rest was recruiting, checking on study halls, and all kinds of organizational stuff. And I wanted to be a basketball coach. At that same time was in the NBA, I think it was 2001 or 2000, where there was 20-something international players drafted in the draft, something like that. And it was really high, and it kept going up each year. And, and Dirk Nowitzki, I was there in Dallas. Dirk Nowitzki had been drafted by the Mavs. And I said, hey, I want to go coach in Europe. Look at all these great players being drafted. I'd like to be in a pro environment where, I don't have to recruit and all these other things, and to see the world. And I just was really lucky and got a chance to get a job in Germany and as an assistant coach for a pro team in Frankfurt. And I took it.
Yeah, for Gordy, who's a world champion right now.
Yes.
He's another world champion in that other sector.
Yes. And we won a championship with Gordy there in Frankfurt. And I mean, he's an unbelievable coach. And actually the growth of Gordy since that time is phenomenal. Mm-hmm. At that time, he was a fantastic defensive coach, and he really knew how to manage players well and construct a team that was cohesive, both basketball-wise and personality-wise. I learned so much from him in the year and a half that I spent with him. But now, years later, his offensive systems were, really, really, really good. And that wasn't, he didn't have those when I was working for him. He developed as a coach.
And you had some young players there. One of them, Freddie, who's our common friend and who's always also been on this podcast. And you had also do some mentorship, as I recall, with the young guys, but also coaching, just being an assistant coach in a professional environment, like you said. What lessons did you feel like you had to learn quickly? What was the uphill battle for you coming from America to Europe in an environment like that to learn on the fly that you didn't learn in college and had to pick up on quickly in Europe?
Wow. I mean, that's enough for two podcasts. But yeah, I mean, I was quite naive. You know, I was at SMU. We were a mid-major team, and we had some talented guys. We had two guys that got drafted in the NBA that were on our team at SMU. So we had some talent. And I thought going over to Germany that, you know, our college team would be able to compete with the first league professional team in Germany. But I was sorely mistaken. That team had, you know, 30-year-old guys that had played for the German national team and won the European Championship. I mean, there was some really, really intelligent and experienced basketball players as well as highly skilled. So, you know, back then, that's 2002, you know, when we at SMU, when we were working on ball screens, I mean, we didn't teach hardly anything about, you know, holding the screen, timing of setting the screen and coming off the screen. And that was about it. We were not, you know, the first week in Germany at practice, I was like, my mind was blown with the detail and all the different things that we were looking at with pick and rolls, different ways to use it and rejecting it and, you know, slipping it. And I mean, it was a real education, basketball education, and just the team play that was way farther ahead than in college. So, you know, terminology was much more detailed. It was just a pro team with a very good coach and really good players. And I mean, I thought I was going over to Europe for a few years to learn and build networks and bring over some Euro players and come back to college. But, you know, in that first week, I realized that I don't want to go back. This is a great lifestyle. You know, pro players, you know, all you're doing is basketball and, you know, 2 practices a day, strategizing about opponents. You know, it was like a dream come true.
Yeah, that reminds me, it rings a bell for me when I made that jump to Cheska, and that was also a like revelation in my head where like you think you know, and then you realize that there's a lot of things you don't know, and you have to be humble enough to understand that you have to be quiet and observe and learn and ask and kind of make mistakes, but also just kind of get those wrinkles out of your system and comprehend, because the speed of execution, the speed of the game was completely different in terms of how much information was being processed at a high level, and you know the bandwidth of the players, how much information, how quickly it was absorbed and implemented, and the mistakes were like eradicated immediately. And those are the things when you jump to one from like several levels up, it's yeah, you just don't know what you're gonna find out. Like you don't know what you don't know, right? But once you know, like you realize that this is really, there's layers to that, and this is one of the highest levels that you can really coach on. So yeah, I can imagine the growth process there was difficult. And then you became a head coach at Giessen, right? Was that right after Frankfurt?
No, so I was at Frankfurt for 4 years, and then while I was at Frankfurt, I got offered the international scouting
That's
position
right.
with the Denver Nuggets.
I
And
wasn't sure. I
so,
wasn't sure which one came first. So let's talk about
yeah,
the position, why you went to the NBA, and then why you came back actually to coach,
yeah,
because that's also very eye-opening.
yeah. So I wasn't looking to get in the NBA. It wasn't really on my radar. You know, Europe was, you know, like I said, when I got there, it was now my kind of dream come true. But when I was approached about it, initially I said no. It was Masai Ujiri. He was at that time the director of scouting for the Nuggets, and I had known Masai. And he asked me, "Hey, do you want to come scout for us? You can live there in Frankfurt and scout Europe." And And initially I told him no. I was like, hey, I'm a coach. I'm not a scout. I love coaching. And then I, thought about it, talked to some friends, and they said, hey, isn't it worth checking out? And after some reflection, I thought, you know what, this is a chance to see if it is something that I would want to pursue. So I took it. It was a great experience. I learned a ton about evaluating players and just a totally different way to look at the game than a coach does. So I did that for 2 seasons. And, I remember the first time that I went to the Nuggets training camp, and I walked in the gym. I won't say who the player was, but it was a player that we all know and could have been a real superstar, never lived up to his potential. But and it was Tim Gergerich. So anyone who's has followed the NBA in the past, Tim Gergerich was basically an icon. He was like a legend as far as individual training and an assistant coach in the NBA, and he worked for, 30 years or more in the NBA. And here he was, this guy, Tim Gergerich, who I'd heard so much about, and he was rebounding for a player. It was just him and the player. And the player was out of 3-point line, and Tim Gergerich is passing the balls out to him, and players, catching and shooting. And Tim Gergerich was saying, straight up and down, straight up and down. So he wanted him to shoot unbalanced, straight up and down. And the player was taking a fade away to the left, taking a fade away to the right, taking a fade away straight back. And each time Tim Gergerich was saying, straight up and down, straight up and down. And there's the player completely disrespecting him, disregarding him right to his face. I could see it if there was 5 players and, he's saying something and a player doesn't do it once or twice, This was one-on-one, saying it over and over again, completely disrespecting. My mind was like, oh my goodness, how do you coach these guys?
Yeah.
Now that's an isolated. Not every player's like that, obviously, but it just left an impression on me. And George Karl was the coach, and we had players: Allen Iverson, Carmelo Anthony, Kenyon Martin, J.R. Smith, a wide variety
Was Klaiser
of
there
players.
too?
Yes, he was.
Yeah.
And he was extremely hard worker. He would shoot threes every time after practice with a rebounder, a passer, and a guy that would just be in his face, this far from him, right in his face, and he'd be shooting threes over him. Yeah. It was impressive. But my point was, with that cast of characters, very talented guys, but also I would say some guys that might be somewhat difficult to coach with. And I thought he did a masterful job of getting those guys to be a unit and to be coachable. But at the same time, I thought, here's a guy who's been doing it, 30 years. And it was a real challenge for him. And how was I, as the guy that's never played higher than high school with no name, going to be able to make it? And maybe I could follow that route of working my way from international scout to video guy to assistant coach to advanced scout assistant, the whole thing, and be on the bench and be there for 15, 20 years and hope I get a head coaching job. And maybe I never do. And I really thought, you know what, I'd rather be in Europe and be a head coach and build a culture like I want to, where the players don't necessarily run the prison. If players are making $40 million a year and your head coach is making $10 million a year, who's more expendable when there's problems?
It's tough. Yeah, it's tough.
Yeah, really tough.
And there's only so many jobs out there in that position, so it's a very niche specialty of that. That we were all kind of navigating the waters of it, and you more so than I, because I've been in this job now I've been dabbling between 2 of them at 2 separate time periods. So I had the best of both worlds in a sense, but I never was a head coach. So that's why I'm talking to you.
Yeah.
So you did, and then after that you did take the Giessen job before you went to Shanghai. So let's talk Giessen, about the Giessen. Yeah. The Giessen experience was a very special, like not a sliding door moment, but a revolutionary kind of experience. So let's talk
Yeah.
about that a little bit.
Yep. Yeah, that definitely was a pivotal moment for me. So I was with the Nuggets, and at that time also I wasn't looking to move. But Giessen 46ers, who were in the first league in Germany, Bundesliga, which is a very good league. That's the league I was in before with Frankfurt. High-level basketball. Yeah, so I had never been a head coach. I think I was 35. And they actually pursued me, and I've been recommended to them by several people. And so, yeah, they came, and actually the sport director from the team, that was his last mission. So he said, hey, I'm quitting the job as a sport director for you. And they said, all right, the last job we want you to do is to hire our coach. So this sport director really liked me, really believed in me. And he hired me, and then he left. So that was a issue right there. Mm-hmm. So there was just a lot of issues, but that was the first one. Mm-hmm. Many people had warned me about that job because management had kind of a reputation as being very difficult, and a lot of people and didn't really know who was the decision maker, and yeah, maybe not always wise decisions, both on the financial side and the basketball side. And so, it was a really, really difficult job. It had numerous things. So it had the management. It had now brought in new management, a new sport director who was 30 years old with no experience. We brought back 9 players from a team that was the worst team in the league that didn't move down. So I didn't have a lot that I could add. I did bring a few players, but and we almost went bankrupt, injury problems. So it was like numerous things on top of each other. Here I am, rookie head coach, 35 years old, hadn't been in the league in 2 years, because I was scouting. I wasn't on top of the league like I was before. And it was really tough. It was miserable. I didn't sleep for, I think, 3 months, because there was problems that I couldn't resolve, that I was trying to figure out how to resolve. And every night I'm like, hey, how can I figure this out tomorrow? And blah, blah, blah. I mean, we didn't have 10 guys in practice for like 2 months.
Just basically putting out fires every day.
Putting out fires every day. Not even being able to play 5-on-5. So, I expressed this to management, but yeah, it didn't happen. Then my sport director got fired because we actually left late for a game. The sport director was in charge of all the travel stuff, and when we leave and these things, and we left, in reasonable time if there was no traffic. But we were in a traffic jam on the highway, sitting there for 2 hours, not moving, and I called the coach, who I knew was an American guy, and said, hey, can we postpone the game for a half an hour? We'll come off the bus, come on the court, and we'll play. He said, I talked with my owner, and he said, nope, we need the points. So we need the points for the win. So you got to forfeit. So we forfeited that game, and my sport director got fired.
Wow.
New sport director came on, who was a former player and coach, had never coached in the first league, wanted to coach in the first league. So the first day he got hired, he brought me in and said, hey, we need a fantastic job in a terrible situation. So basically telling me that I was going to be fired. It was just a matter of time. So that was pretty devastating for me, because I'd worked 17 years for this one head coaching job, finally get it. And I'm fired in half a year. My identity that I had for myself was basketball coach. That's what I did for, so many years, basically full time, dedicating my life to it like so many coaches do. And that was my identity. So when you get fired, it's basically you failed, you're a failure. And I was crushed. And, I had to really take a look look in the mirror and say, hey, who are you? Are you just a basketball coach, or are you more than that? And do I want to just judge myself as a basketball coach? Because as a basketball coach, we're judged by fans, owners, media, and we don't have any control over that. We can do the best job that we can and still fail and be fired, and our identity's crushed. Mm-hmm. So at that point, I really, like I said, it was a pivotal moment. And I realized, okay, I have to define myself outside of being a coach, and coach is just a part of who I am, not my whole being. And that really led to a lot of self growth and lessons learned. And one of the lessons learned at Giessen was, I knew as a coach, you have to manage the people below you, the players, the staff, the fans. But what I realized at Giessen is you also have to spend a lot of time managing the people above you, the management, the owners, the sponsors. You have to do the best you can at controlling, guiding how they're viewing the situation, because they don't have the reality. You have the reality as a coach. What's going on? What's really going on? What you need to win? What it takes. They have their idea, and every owner I've worked for thinks they know how you should coach basketball, how to build a team, how to build a club. And a lot of times the owners in Europe, especially at lower levels, do not have that experience. They're great because they own a law firm or they own a medical company, but they don't know how to run a basketball team.
Different avenue.
But yeah, and that's a really big challenge.
How much, after getting fired, how much self-doubt was there before self-growth and learning experience came into it? Like, you naturally start to reflect, and then we all beat ourselves up, right? We're the biggest enemy of ourselves in our heads. How long was that period for you, and how difficult was it to outgrow your self-doubt?
Yeah, I don't know how long the period was, but it was a months. And I'm someone that does reflect and is self-critical, and I think that's vital to growth. You don't learn from experiences. You learn from the reflecting and the analyzation of those experiences. So if you're doing something, but you're not going back and really diving deep, you're not going to get that much out of it. And I really did dive deep on that. And there's a lot of things I could have done better. But I think the main reason for my failure as a leader at that time wasn't a lack of basketball knowledge, or it was more that this pressure that was coming on me wore me down, energetic with my energy and with my mental energy. So I was looking tired, and I was tired. I felt tired. You could see it on my face. And as a leader, you have to exude confidence. You have to exude that you're sure of what you're doing, that the path that you're on is the right way, that you believe in your guys, that you believe you're going to win. And that was my biggest enemy. I was not exuding confidence. I was exuding fatigue, fear,
nervousness.
Nervousness. And so with all the problems that we were having, maybe the older, more experienced version of myself, well, I know I would have dealt with it much better. Whether I would have overcome that or not, I don't know. But that was my biggest enemy, was just the self-doubt, the fatigue, mental fatigue, not exuding confidence and surety as a leader. And also getting rid of some of the guys that were cancerous on the team earlier. I was afraid to cut them because we didn't have enough. We didn't have 10 in practice as it was. I cut these two guys. We might have 6. And that was, and maybe I should have done it, but I would have really had to been brave to do that. And at that time, I wasn't strong enough.
Yeah, for a rookie coach, that braveness is definitely, like, you don't have the experience yet or the knowledge to know the repercussions of it, or how much it can open up, by like addition by subtraction. But right. that comes with experience, and that's also something that's very, very, nip or tuck. Like it's a fine line there.
Yeah. And you
But
never know until after something like that is done, whether it was the right decision or not.
yeah, yeah. So what was the biggest takeaway when after that you were at peace with that situation at some point? Did it take you a long time to kind of like put it away? And when was the point where you stopped thinking about it? It was just kind of, you took the lessons from it and then you just moved on from it to go
I think
to
when I got my
Shanghai?
next job,
Shanghai,
I got Shanghai Sharks. So I basically, after I got fired from Giessen, I had a year sabbatical where I lived in Spain. It was fantastic. And met a young Darko Rajakovic, who was coaching a Division IV team in Spain.
Torredones, yeah.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah. So I lived in Spain for a year, and then I got the job in China. And, these were bold decisions. I mean, making the decision to leave SMU, which was a good job, a mid-major in NCAA is a good job. All my friends are saying, "Are you crazy? You're leaving a D1 school to go to Germany?" But when I did it, I thought, "Hey, this was the best decision I ever made." And then the offer for China, and that was another one where I was like, "What? You're going there?" And it was a pretty bold decision. But again, it was a great experience. I don't regret it for a minute. I was there 3 years. I was an assistant, and I was a much better assistant after being a head coach. I still made mistakes as an assistant coach, but I was much better with the perspective of a head coach. Mm-hmm. And one quote that Kevin O'Neill, the coach that I worked for at Tennessee, told me that I remembered when I got the head coaching job is he said, the 6 inches between the assistant coach's chair and the head coach's chair is the biggest 6 inches in the world. And it was a great quote. It's so true. So going back to being an assistant was much more enjoyable. and it was a great learning experience being in China, not just with the basketball, but with the whole cultural experience.
What were the main things that you could apply right away after being a head coach to help the head coach and being a better assistant coach? What was that, like the one glaring thing that you felt like you could help him right away with?
I think just realizing that my job as an assistant coach is to do whatever the head coach needs for him to be successful. That's the role of an assistant coach. Do whatever the head coach needs for him to be successful. So that meant trying to take away as many little problems as possible so he doesn't have to deal with them or think about them. Mm-hmm. Whether it be little problems between teammates or travel issues or making sure everything on the scout report is the way he wants it and the video is the way he wants it. And so I would say just having that perspective of trying to make his life as easy as possible for the head coach so he can deal with the big problems that only he can deal with.
So after that experience in Shanghai, you at some point you wanted to be a head coach. Obviously, again, you became a head coach in Hanau. So what was the biggest change of identity from the first head coaching job to the second head coaching job? Because you said you had a big your identity crushed after you got fired because everything went into it to be a head coach and to define yourself as a head coach. This is how players also they die to deaths, that people say that they die a regular death, but also die the career. And afterwards, if they all they knew was a basketball player, they go into regular life and just don't know how to deal with it anymore because the attention is not there anymore. They don't have the success, the crowds. They don't have the emotional gratification. What was the biggest change for you, and how did you prepare yourself for the new head coaching position that you got later on, and felt like you were a different person? In what ways?
After China, I was in China for 3 years, and I took another sabbatical because I had made some good money in China, and I had my fill of China, and I knew that I wanted to get back to Europe. But I took a year sabbatical and lived in Boston and went and visited NBA teams and college teams and did like a route through Europe. And
I visited
also,
you there too. I remember that.
Yeah.
You were living close to Harvard Square.
That's right. Yeah. That was a fantastic time. Also just for personal self-growth, but also where I put down all of my philosophy and concepts and on how to build a team, how to build a culture, how to build players, strategical stuff. And I put it all down, on paper, basically, and made like a manual, a handbook for myself. So I had the philosophical one and then the actual like workbook of drills and plays and all these things. So I did that. And so I came into the job much, much more confident of what I wanted our culture to be, what kind of players that I was going to get. And because, also with a scouting background, very, very defined on what were critical things for us as our culture, who we wanted on our team, and trying to fit players together with a small budget, because we had a small budget at that team that I went to in Hanau, Germany. So I came in with a lot more confidence. I came in with a lot clearer picture of what we were going to do, who our identity was going to be, and also with the idea that I had to spend significant amount of time with the management to guide their expectations.
Yeah, so that's like you said, managing up and managing down is important. Managing the expectations and constant communication. Probably, how did you at some point? I remember that you guys made the playoffs. Then you guys got relegated the following year, right? Then you played couple years later.
Yeah.
So at some point there's always pressure involved. Like the relegation is there's pressure for a head coach, definitely for every game, basically, right?
Yeah.
But how did you deal with the daily pressure of a head coach and being relegated, then going to the third division, and then having to rebuild yourself, not lose your confidence? I mean, there's constant mental challenges in the mind of a head coach. Like you can't get rattled by that, and you have to be able to stay on course in what you believe in, and not get sidetracked by people outside of the picture. Like you said, like a lot of people up or down, they feel like they know everything better and never coached before. So how do you manage that pressure from people that may not understand what they're talking about, but also the internal pressure that you apply to yourself?
Yeah, I mean, I just had a much stronger a sense of self at that time, and I knew that the process that I was implementing was the right process. I mean, I think we did things the right way, and I was there in Hanau for 4.5 years. And after the first year, they gave me a 4-year contract, which is unheard of at that level, second league in Germany. And, we built my year 2 and 3, we built really good teams, in my opinion. We made the playoffs in my third year. In year 2, we had injuries and some players had to leave for personal reasons, which prevented us. But year 3, we built a really good team on a low budget that made the playoffs. That was our pinnacle. The problem was the management wasn't, they had big dreams, but didn't always were able to follow through with the things required to achieve those dreams, i.e. funds. And actually the year we made the playoffs, before we had made the playoffs, management had told me they didn't want us to make the playoffs that year because it would cost us more for those extra 3 games of playoffs, right? And they wanted to save that for the following year. And I could not go along with that. That's a crazy idea. It's not fair to our players or our fans. We've worked so hard. If we have a chance to make the playoffs, we need to go for the playoffs, and then we'll solve whatever issues after that. And hopefully you have momentum now that you made the playoffs. We made the playoffs, and one of the owners came to me right after the win and he said, that's really, really good for you, Simon. It was good for you. Good for me. It was good for
Oh,
our team.
Wow.
So
So you made it look like you were selfish by
yes,
getting...
exactly. I was doing it all for me. So, these are the issues that guys that are watching this podcast from Europe probably have similar experiences, but I've had a lot of these that were just real challenges. But so to go back to your point, how did I manage that stress and whatnot? Well, I had a much stronger sense of self in that, hey, what I have to value, what I have to measure myself on is the process. Am I executing the right process? And am I sticking to that? And also important to me is treating people right, trying to be the best leader I can and lead men and help them grow, be the best person they can be the best players they can be, try to build the best culture that we can, and develop guys as basketball players and bring in the right people. And if I'm doing those things to the best of my ability day after day, and, we're scouting teams and we're, preparing game plans and trying to do the best job with in-game coaching, the best I can do is the best I can do. And, hey, and I just said, hey, if they're going to fire me, they're going to fire me. I'm doing everything I can. That's out of my control. If they're mad at me for making the playoffs this year, that's not my problem. That's their problem, right? And so, yeah, and we had some good runs. I think we built a great culture. I had numerous players on throughout the seasons that said this is the best team I've been on, and I took a lot of pride in that. And I took a lot of pride in the relationships, good, positive relationships that I had with players from the past. And example is Freddie, a mutual friend who I coached, lived with him for 2.5 years. And he is just an outstanding human being and a success in every sense of the word. And I'm very proud of the little, whatever impact I had on him as a young man and as my player. I take a lot of, it's very rewarding for me.
Yeah, no, I can imagine, because mentorship is a big part of coaching. And then when you see that the mentorship pays off, actually, it's much more, gives you purpose. It gives you some sort of sense of accomplishment off the court, not only on the court, that everybody sees the wins on the court, but nobody sees the wins off the court that you accomplish through relationships, through mentorship, through helping them achieve their personal goals. And Freddie went off to become a superstar in his role off the court in a different avenue outside of basketball, and in basketball with the women's team that he also is coaching under Laura. So he's been successful in his own right, and not where everybody expected him to early on, because he was a very high level talent that didn't pan out, but ended up panning out in different areas of the world. So the world doesn't end, in that one avenue. And this is what we're going to go to also with your next job as well. But before we go into the Cologne job, what was the most gratifying moment up until that point? Like, did you, in terms of mentorship, gratification that you got out of coaching, being a head coach, and being with Hanau, was there something that stands out the most for you, where you feel like this warms my heart?
Yeah. So after I got fired from Hanau. This was 2.5 years after we made the playoffs, and it was also again where a new GM, sport director, CEO came in, and he wanted to go in a different direction. And so it was kind of surprising. It was certainly surprising for all the players, and at Hanau. And after I'd gotten fired, I don't know, 3 or 4 days later, the players threw me a party at one of the players' house, and they made a video. It was like, I don't know, it might be only 3-minute video, but it was of, I would say, 25 players, former players from that team and players from prior teams. And each one just giving a little video message.
That's cool.
Of a thanks and what impact I had on them. I mean, that was I have it this day on my computer. It's the most powerful thing for me, that all those players felt like I impacted their lives and thanked me for it. That was amazing.
These personal messages touch people, and then it gives you a sense of that you did, like you said, you believed in the process, you did the right thing. And sometimes the process is the right process, but it just doesn't pan out, and it's not necessarily your fault. It's just sometimes how the stars align and how other factors come into play. In sports, professional sports, there's so many dynamics that are just out of our control, that sometimes we just have to roll with the punches. But along the way, not forget to smell the flowers. You get those moments, and you gotta cherish those, because they don't come very often.
Right, I agree 100%. Now, that being said, you said that there's a lot of factors outside of your control, and I took jobs that were challenging for sure, teams that were kind of at the bottom, or were at the bottom, and my dream was to build them up. And the thing is, if you join a team that's already very successful, you may not be able to change a culture like you want to, because things are set, things are going good. Whereas the teams that I chose, I at least had the opportunity to change the culture, right? Mm-hmm. and build it up. Now, that being said, a lot of things out of my control. There's a lot of things that I could have done better as a head coach that maybe would have changed our direction. Maybe, I think it's a combination. It's one, when you get fired, it's not one thing. It's usually a multitude of things. And it's a combination of things that were out of your control and things that were in your control that maybe if you had done it differently, you could have salvaged it, even with the things that were out of your control, mm-hmm. right? So I think I was a good coach, but I think my biggest skill set was developing people and managing people and building people up, and building a good culture, and with the X's and O's and some of the things that I could have done to make our team better, but might have been more cutthroat. I didn't do those, and maybe if I had, maybe I would have been more successful. But you never know. But that's where I think you just for me myself, I have to judge it on my actions and trying to be the best version of myself, doing what I do really well and trying to do it as much as I can, and trying to find people that make up for my weaknesses and have me and surround myself with those types of people.
Yeah, that's the thing, that you feel like, I always had the feeling you have a really great perception on life, and that's one thing that you can always share with other players. Like, players don't want to always talk about basketball, because it's not always about the X's and O's. It's not always about the basketball. Sometimes it's about other things to help them to widen their horizon and understand other things in life in order to apply it maybe on the court, because there's a lot of parallels all the time that I find also, just by going through life and then sometimes reading a book. And then I was like, okay, I can totally apply that in the coaching job that I work in the summertime, and this applies to this situation or that situation. And then when you talk to players, it's also a way to use that information that you have experienced in your life and seen or read about, and then help them to switch their perception, on basketball, because it's not always about the X's and O's. It's not always about just the execution. It's sometimes just the way the player talks to himself. For example, I've listened to a podcast about psychology, and it was not necessarily about sports psychology. It was more about general psychology of a human being, and how we tend to berate ourselves for not being perfect, like that we're just like, you suck, you're just a bad worker, you should not go, you should, quit and retire and go in a different direction, and just kind of cursing yourself out mentally. And then they said, would you actually talk to your best friend the way you talk to yourself? Would you actually tell your best friend the same thing that you're telling yourself now? Or would you encourage him? Would you actually tell him, hey, look, man, like take it a little bit lighter, it's not a big deal. Do it better next time. It's fine. Your form was fine. You just missed a shot. You're going to make the next free throw. And then, you talk to a player, you tell the player, like, is this how you want to talk to yourself? Or is you want to talk to yourself the way you talk to your best friend? And when I heard that, I guess that's how I applied it to the sports world, to the basketball coaching, because, they were talking about a different avenue, but this is applicable to sports 100%, because you wouldn't talk to your teammate, you would, in the way you talk to yourself, like that, or vice versa. You wouldn't talk to yourself the way you wouldn't talk to your teammate the way you talk to yourself. So that's one thing that I think that I drew from it, and I find those lessons constantly. And I think it's important to have a wider horizon, to educate yourself off the court in order to apply it to the work that you're doing. I think it's called T specialist or something like that. Having a wide array of talents or information that you can apply in your field. I think it's a T form, T specialist or something like that, I think. So before we go into the next avenue of how to not only redefine your head coaching perception and head coaching identity and apply it to your next head coaching job, but also how you redefined your own job or yourself and went in a completely different avenue, and how you got to that point of making the decision, I want to share my screen for you, and we're going to talk about Cologne a little bit, and you're going to tell me without like, I don't want to keep beating up on you. I feel like I'm beating up on you and talking to you about
it
things.
Is what it is.
Yeah, it is what it is. I mean, that's why I like talking to you, because it's a very
one thing about getting fired so much is you get thick skin.
Yeah, like okay, next.
Yeah. Not too many people can get to me.
I think it was called Rhine Stars, right? Rhine Stars, Cologne. Yeah. Cologne. All right, so
so we're going to look at a bad box score. Okay,
we're going to look at the box score here on ProBallers.com, which is a sponsor, and we're going to show how far back they go in Rhine Stars.
Okay,
Cologne.
But I wasn't with the team in April and May.
No, I know, but we have the schedule right here.
Oh, okay. All right.
We go right to we go right to February, and I think this is the game right here. February against the Sixers.
Oh, okay, yeah.
Was that the last game?
Yeah, that was the last game. That's right.
All right. So this is the box score of your last game against the Sixers before you got let go for the third time. And what do you remember from this box score? What do you remember from that game at all? Like, what's the first memory that comes to your mind when you see that box score, and what kind of memories come up?
Well, number one, we couldn't stop Vincent Federico. But I mean, he crushed us. The thing that sticks out to my mind is that the CEO and sport director of the team was on the bench, and so this was already signaling to our team that they had lost faith in it. So at that point, there's no point of return.
You felt it coming already? You felt it coming
already? Yeah. If it wasn't this game, it was going to be the next one. And I mean, this was a team that before the season, I mean, I knew this. The sport director told me, "Hey, we have a super small budget this year. Our goal is to stay in the league, we just have to stay in the league. And then next year we'll bump the budget up and make moves." Which would have been fine, but with the team that we had, I thought, even though I hadn't been in that league now for a while, but the first day of preseason, our second best player, we had an American, Vincent Golson, who was a stud, who was a shooting guard. He's not a point guard, but he's 5'8". And
5'8".
Yeah, I mean, he's tiny and he's strong. He was a good player, but he's not a point guard. He didn't know how to. I love the kid's a great kid, but he's not a. We had a German guy was a
Finland First Division. Finland First Division. He's playing now.
Yeah, and at that time, he'd never played.
Yeah.
He was a few years out of college when he came. But anyways, the first day of preseason, our German point guard, who was a really good player and floor general, great pick and roll player, very good 3-point shooter, got an injury that he was out for the season. And he was very cheap for us because he worked in the office in marketing, right? So he was really cheap for the team. So then when he got hurt, we couldn't replace him with 700 euros. Nobody. You can't get even not a very good German player for 700 euros, never mind a top player in the league. Yeah. So that was tough. But anyways, what I remember from that game is the sport director sitting on the bench. Basically, all the players knew it was coming. It was a matter of time, you know. And I thought our guys fought pretty hard, but we didn't have anybody. We didn't have a defensive stopper. Mm-hmm. We're not a good defensive team 1-on-1, and we could not stop Federici. Vincent Federici.
Yeah. Hey,
yeah.
Shout out to Kazlauskas. There's Lithuanian Lukas Kazlauskas that had actually 10-point game and playing in Lithuania second division right now. So shout out to Lukas Kazlauskas, who just is the Lithuanian on the come up. I guess not. He's 32 years old now.
Yeah.
All right. That's just a short introduction of my sponsor, proballs.com. And so after that job, what was the thought process and the decision-making process of changing avenues and completely redefining yourself and going into a different direction? How long did you wrestle with yourself of giving up your dream of continuing to coach at a high level and continue to be a professional head coach and not going into the finance sector? What was the process for that in your mind?
Well, when I took the Cologne job, I knew it was a risk. I knew it was a high risk because, like he had told me, hey, we don't have much money. We just want to stay in the league. And I know, because I've been in both head coaching jobs I had before that was the same. When you have a low budget team, you're much more susceptible to injury because you don't have a deep roster, right? Yeah. So you're dependent on a few guys that hopefully are steals that are cheap but really good players. So you're heavily dependent on them. So, for example, when Victor Frankelmaus, that was the name of the point guard, great player and a great guy. I like him a lot. And so with Cologne, for example, we needed Vincent and Victor to be healthy through the whole season. If we didn't, you're already climbing an uphill battle. And so I knew before taking the job, it was a high risk. So I said, hey, if I do a good job and we get a little lucky, this could be a good spot because they were in the first league years ago. Everybody's heard of this club. We have fantastic facilities and, potentially big sponsors behind it. So there was a lot of good reasons to take the job, but you're only an injury away from being in a tough spot. So I said, all right, I'm going to take the job. And if I get fired, time to change course.
So you already before you got the job, before you took the job, you already decided that.
Yeah.
Okay, interesting.
Yeah. So this was like my last go, and I loved coaching. I worked at 25 years. It was my passion for all that time. Dedicated my life to it, just like so many coaches do. But also there's a lot of other sides to me. Like I said, that just not my identity is not only basketball coach. I love museums. I love concerts. I, want to spend real quality time with my extended family and my brothers and sisters and my nephews and nieces and my mom and dad who are getting older. And I've always, for 18, 19 years, I lived overseas, which meant I saw my family basically one time a year in the off season. So, that's a huge sacrifice to me.
Sacrifice is real, man.
Real. And I said, and the other thing is, what were my realistic options? having been fired 3 times, and I'd been at the first league, I'd worked in the NBA, I'd worked in China, worked in EuroLeague, but then I also worked in Pro A, second league Germany, third league Germany. And what was my realistic avenues where I could get a job? Yeah, I know a ton of people in the NBA, but I'm not in a daily contact with them, and they're not going to hire a guy they haven't talked to in a year. They've got other people on their list who are working for them that deserve it more. And that means, okay, am I going to get an assistant job in the first league in Germany and hope that guy has success and I can ride his coattails a little bit till I can get a good job off of a winning team that he's leading, right? And also financially, do I want to make that sacrifice of, making the money an assistant coach does in first league Germany, for example, for 3 years. And then hopefully I get a head job with that. I have a chance to win. And so basically I said, I stuck with my idea that if I didn't turn it around at Cologne, that I was going to go a different direction. I didn't necessarily know exactly what that was, but I was going to do something different.
But did other factors come into play? How old were you when you left? That was 3 years ago?
I'd say 49.
49. Did age matter? Was that something that you felt like?
Yeah, I've been grinding for a while, and now I've had to grind the last year, but my plan is that I'm not going to grind like I did as a coach for the next 10 years, 15 years.
Yeah.
So, and it's not the same, like, I'm an employee now, I'm not the owner. So I don't have sleepless nights. I'm working a lot now, but I expect that in a year or so, when I have my processes and systems in place and my network in place and really have an expertise for the field I'm in, that I won't have to be grinding like I did as a head coach. That's my hope.
Tell the people what you're doing now, and then we're going to talk about telling people first of all of what you're doing right now and what you started to you got your license now in what field?
Yeah. So now I am a financial advisor working for a wealth management firm, but my specialty and my focus is on retirement plans for businesses. So it's totally different than anything I've done. And I didn't have any background in finance. I studied psychology in college, degree in psychology and sport management. So no background whatsoever in finance. So a friend of mine is basically the CEO of the wealth management firm that I now work for, and he is a former basketball coach. And he thought I'd be good at the job, and he said, "Hey, join me. We'll teach you everything you need to know. I think you'll be really good at this job." And so I did it. And I came back home. I'm living near to my family, relatively, and which was very important to me, and the potential to have a good income in a few years, a really good income in a few years, and to have a steady job that I wasn't worried about if I was going to get fired next week if we lost to the BSW Sixers. So I came here. I live in New Hampshire, and I had to start from ground zero, and it was a real challenge. I had to take basically 3 certification exams in a row, and each book to prepare was 500 pages with terminology that I had to look up from the most basic finance term. I was looking every word up and working half days and studying the rest of the day. Sometimes going to a hotel for a weekend just to isolate myself and study all weekend. And very intensive tests. I passed them all, and now I'm actually working and doing things that I'll be doing for the next few years.
Yeah, it's I can't imagine to completely redefining yourself, starting over in a completely new field with new lingo and not knowing really what's ahead of you. How did the coaching experiences prepare for you in this process of relearning and rewiring your brain, basically?
I just have the belief that that I can take on challenges and find a way to be successful. I mean, from moving to different countries, living in different cultures, trying to learn other languages like German, being in all these high pressure situations with your back against the wall, and building teams up and having just the general challenges of getting people to work together and try to get the most out of people, trying to win games, and all these experiences. Just, I have the confidence in myself that I'll figure it out and I'll find a way.
Yeah, it's people. You have to be a people's person in coaching as well as in other avenues as well. I think that helps. I think the discipline of and close to the perfectionist mind kind of helps you also to be as tidy and as committed to in other crafts as well. When you know that your back's against the wall basically, and you have to really apply yourself into this avenue, and going to get into games, preparing yourself for wins and losses, and having the pressure of maybe losing the game and maybe getting fired. I think that dealing with that pressure over the course of the years also helps to really being able to absorb and be resilient to those situations and not let that penetrate your brain while you're trying to relearn everything.
Right, 100%. I mean, and all the basketball situations, but all the life situations, living in China, being in situations you got to figure it out, or being in a country you don't speak the language, and being in an arena in Turkey, and I got dropped off by a taxi, and I was a half an hour away from the hotel, and the arena was in the middle of nowhere, and just trying to figure out how you're going to get back.
Out of your
things
comfort
like
zone
this.
completely.
Yeah. You're always out of your comfort zone, right?
Yeah.
So you get used to that, and you just say, hey, I'm going to find a way. It might not be easy or efficient. It might take me 3 hours to get back to the hotel, but I'll get there.
Have you thought about coaching on the side to kind of scratch the itch a little bit, just as a hobby, as a passion project?
I mean, I think what I would like to do is just do like individual workouts with players that are around me.
Yeah.
And more so to just, so many kids need to be built up, right? There's so many kids lacking self-confidence that don't, like teaching them about how they can be successful in whatever environment they're in, to be a great teammate.
Yeah, that's a great idea.
To be resilient, to have confidence in yourself, to play without fear, to move on to the next play, all these things. And, so one of the things that I was worried about leaving coaching is as I've mentioned earlier in this podcast, is the biggest reward for me is impacting people, right? And trying to help them and develop them, and help them grow. And as a coach, it's built in. I got 12 guys every day that are my people that I can impact. And then on top of that, then there's the fans, the kids that come to the summer camp and things like that. And I thought, man, when I leave coaching, who am I going to impact? Where can I make my mark with helping our community and whatnot? And I just came to the conclusion that, okay, it's not going to be what I hoped was a grand scale of impacting a lot of people. But my goal now is just try to impact the people that are in my circle, people I come in contact with. So, I have, colleagues, people I work with that have sons and daughters that play basketball. And so I say, hey, if they want some workouts, I'll be happy to work with them. And, because through the workouts, that's where I really could impact our players,
Totally.
Lots of teachable moments.
That's a great idea. I feel like that's phenomenal. It comes down to mentorship again that we talked about, that you did early on in your career with college kids, then with Freddie at Frankfurt and with other. I mean, it goes hand in hand, I think, and then it gives you also a avenue where you can shut off your regular day-to-day work, the day-to-day grind, and you need some kind of meditation process, or that you can kind of give your brain a break from the regular job.
Yeah, definitely.
Are you ready for my ATOs that I always throw out at people? And those are
let's do it.
Not X's and O's, but more philosophical ATOs.
Okay.
All right. So the first one, and it's just quick, and first thing that comes to mind, whatever you feel like is the right answer. The best advice you would give to your younger self, while whether it was a younger coach, yourself as a younger coach, or a younger person.
Don't be so afraid of failure. Do your best and go in with confidence. Decide how you want to do it. Make sure it's done with thought and that you've prepared. But then once you do that, go full bore without you got to do it without fear. You just got to go if you're going 100%. And be decisive in your decision making, and believe that whatever decision you're going to make is the right one. And you have to, even if you're not sure, you have to. Muhammad Ali once said, "Hey, I was a champion before I was a champion." So he believed he was a champion before he was a champion. Mm-hmm. And I think you have to have that mentality as a leader.
Best advice you would give to a young head coach?
Do your very best to hire the best assistants for you, that fit you, that make up for your weaknesses, that can tell you the truth, that are going to give you valuable feedback. There's feedback and there's valuable feedback. The worst assistants are the ones that think they know it all, but have never been a head coach. And they're spouting off all these things that are not really that valuable. They got to come to you with stuff that's valuable, that you can believe and trust in and utilize. And as an assistant, you don't want to come with problems, come with solutions. Don't tell me the problem. Tell me how we can solve the problem, right? So as a head coach, you've got to find people that can help you be the best you can be. And they make up for your weaknesses. They can give you valuable information, and they're loyal.
Best advice you would give a coach who's trying to transition into a new field?
Yeah, I would say really try to investigate utilize your knowledge of yourself, what you're really, really good at as a coach, and what field that could transition to. So, for example, with my field, I'm not a finance expert, but that's not the skill set that's going to make me successful as in my job. My job is with retirement plans for small businesses. What I need to do is develop relationships with small business owners and to gain their trust, and to communicate clearly and simply that they're, and that skill set right there is what's going to make me successful. So identifying what your skill set is, what your best skill set is, and finding a job that you can use those skill sets in.
Most underrated part of coaching?
Well, I think 90% of your success is made in the summer. So the players you choose, because if you don't, one guy can ruin a team. One cancerous guy can destroy a team. You got to really do your very best to choose the right guys. Now, it's not fail-safe, right? I mean, every draft we see guys that don't pan out. It's human nature. There is no formula that's guaranteed, but put a lot of effort into getting the right guys on the bus.
Most gifted book, besides that's the one you gave me.
That's my number one for sure.
Atomic Habits.
Yeah.
Oh,
I've given
wow.
that. Right. That's the book I've given the most.
I'm one of them.
Sorry.
So yeah, I'm not special enough to give you the
Yeah, I mean that book is the most impactful book I've ever read about impacting myself
Atomic
and
Habits.
changing my
What did you learn
yeah.
from there, from the most from that book?
That if you really want to stick with a habit, you've got to start super small and make it easy to get the habit in place. Don't worry about don't go and start a workout plan and do it 2 times a week for an hour and a half. You're not going to stick with it. You do it 5 minutes tomorrow or 2 minutes, and then 2 minutes the next day, and then after 2 weeks, you're bumping it up. That's a huge, and then the identity that you think of yourself as a guy who works out, not as someone who's trying to start a workout.
If there was one quote that you could put on a billboard, that's a Tim Ferriss question too. I'm just being transparent. If there's one quote that you could put on a billboard for everybody to see and think about, whatever quote, whatever avenue that's from, what would you put on that billboard? It doesn't have to be a quote. It can be a statement or a sentence or a word that you feel like that's impactful and can make people think.
Well, I would go back and I referenced it earlier, but I think it's a really important point for anybody, and I did write it down because I knew you were going to ask me. It's we do not learn from experience, we learn from reflecting on experience, and that's huge. I mean, and I think the ability to be a great teammate, if you cannot be reflective and if you cannot be constructively self-critical, you can't be a great teammate. You have to be able to think about a situation, analyze it, and you have to think about yourself, where you fit in that, and what's the reality of that, and how you can improve. If you can't do that, you can't be a great teammate, in my opinion. And that's not just for teams, that's for family, relationships, any kind of team in the workplace.
Totally. And I feel like we can leave it at that as well, because I feel that one of the bigger things that I've heard lately, and it's recency bias, obviously, but also that you can learn a lot more from reflective losers than from winners who are not able to reflect. Because winners, they don't have they don't get not all of them get a sense of, oh, that I've barely won, or we won, but we made some mistakes here and there. A lot of the winners forget how they won and what could have went wrong, or what like broke their way. Whereas losers that are able to reflect, they're able to reflect and see why they've lost, what they could have done different, and just having a critical mindset and being able to pick it all apart in order to navigate those waters and not make the same mistakes again.
Yeah, I mean, I would venture to say that we reflect a lot more and think about things a lot more when they've caused us pain, as opposed to when they haven't. So when you win, I would say I thought much more about games that I lost than games that I won, right? And then go back and say, hey, what could we have done better? A lot of times you'll take a win, you're like, all right, next game, let's move on. And when you lose, you're like, wait, what could we have done better here? Where were our mistakes? What were the key reasons we lost? So, all the difficult moments in my life caused me pain, and from that pain, reflection and how it could be done better, what I can take from this, how I can learn from this, how I can grow from this.
That's again, and we've finished a full circle again. Michael Jordan's mindset: we have to be in cut in high school, and then making the team the next year. Now, when you lose and you take things personally, you take it to another level next time.
That's right. That's right.
All right, brother. We took it full circle. Okay. We're taking it home. Thanks for being a friend, first of all, and one of the best ones I have in my circle. It's good to have you in my corner. Thanks for talking about it. I hope I was not too I mean, it was direct, but I hope I was not too intrusive with everything. I feel like this is very helpful, and it's also the graveyard of coaches that didn't make it as much bigger. Not everybody can be a Messina, a Kozlauskas, and whatever. So I think that this is a very eye-opening eye-opening episode for many young coaches, and just to have an idea of also what other avenues there are and how to navigate those waters.
Yeah. Well, I hope some coach can take something of it and have it help them in some way. If so, then that's great.
Where can people find you?
It. What?
Where can people find you?
They can find me. I'm not really on the internet. I mean, it's not being it, but they can email me. That's no problem. I'll be happy to.
Facebook, LinkedIn. You're not using any of it?
Oh yeah. My LinkedIn. Yeah, they can hit me
LinkedIn.
on LinkedIn. I haven't changed it yet. It still says coach. I need to change it.
It says leader also on there. I saw. So
that's right.
Yeah, that applies to every field.
Exactly. Yeah, I hope so. That's my goal.
Yeah. So if you want to reach out to Simon, go to LinkedIn and find him there, Simon Cote. Thanks, Simon. Yes. Thanks for being there. And everybody, stay tuned. There's more content coming. Thanks.
All right.